Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here with my good friend Jay, also known as Azira, and today we are introducing a new way to use Ableton with the data looper called song mode. Jay has used the data looper a little bit, but kind of the point of this is for me to introduce this new mode, and Jay, as our layperson here, is going to be able to kind of ask any questions, clarify anything that doesn't make sense. So kind of first thing, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about what song mode is and why I have made it. So here we are in Ableton. And this is a new template that is included with the Data Looper installer called the Live 11 Song Mode template. And so song mode is born of the fact that if you want a traditional kind of DJ workflow where you have multiple decks and you can kind of crossfade between songs, there's no really good way to do that in Ableton, because when you launch a scene, it launches everything across the entire track list rather than just launching something on a single deck. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is, rather than having these scenes that are all kind of linear, if I looked on like an Ableton Push or even looked at something like Touchable, all of the scenes are just scene names. I don't have any idea, and there's no concept of song in that. It's all just kind of collections of clips. And so what I wanted to do was bring a workflow that was kind of like what you would think at a traditional gig, where you have a your set list, where it's like, okay, I'm playing these 12 songs, but then breaking down the songs into song parts, where it's like, okay, I know that song number one has an intro, has a verse, has a chorus. I basically want to load song number one up in Ableton, and then all I want to really think about is the parts within the song. I don't want to have to think about like all of these different scenes. And so song mode basically does that in a really ergonomic way. And so if you look at the way the set is structured, you have two group tracks. And you can have up to 9 decks, but right now I just have these two set up here. The group tracks then contain tracks of stems. So basically, you can have as many stem tracks as you want inside these group tracks here. And then on the side, on the scene list here, there's this kind of important delimiters, which are basically kind of characters that tell the script, hey, there's something special about this scene. So you'll see right here, this is S number 1, and then song 1, and then intro, and then a little $sign. So I'm just going to put that on the screen so we can kind of look at it here. So here we go. I'm going to type that out. S number 1.
So can I pause you with just the basic idea behind this program is to give us more flexibility of how we play our songs and be able to kind of like section out the different parts of the song, rather than just being able to like launch the entire song and have it play in one consistent way. It gives us a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
How we go from different song parts.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just stepping back, kind of what I've learned just looking at a lot of different performers kind of sets and how they're performing, is that the paradigm has largely shifted to a place where bands are just using the arrangement view here. They put all of their backing tracks here and they press play and they just play along.
Right.
And so that becomes, that's cool for like 1 or 2 shows, but then for the band, it gets really boring. There's not much variation. And then there's not really a sense of improvisation. So what this is attempting to do is basically allow you to fluidly go from like an improvisatory loop performance thing and then step directly into a song and then play your song and then get out of it right into a loop performance thing or like some level of improvisation, because you're not locked with the clip system. You're not locked to a timeline, basically. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I'm going to add this. I'm going to then kind of show how this like song language works. So here's an example of song number 1. So you'll see S number 1. That indicates it's song number 1. And it's important that it looks exactly like this. So capital S, hashtag, the song number. And then in curly brackets, you have the song title, and that can be kind of whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the square brackets, you have a song part. And then there's this $sign that is basically saying, if the $sign exists in the scene name, it's saying when I load the song, I want to start this part right away, rather than just kind of loading it into memory and then having it queued up and ready to go. So if I
Essentially, the $sign presses play.
yeah, essentially the $sign presses play when you load the song.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just loading the song and then it's like the data looper is then ready to start launching song parts. It loads this, the $sign means load the song and start launching the song part right away.
Got it.
And so, yeah, that basically specifies this is a song number 1, and this row corresponds to the intro part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that collection of deck 1 and deck 2 belong to the intro when you click that set 1 or song 1.
Yeah, exactly. So this whole horizontal row here is song 1. Now, there's the decks should be completely synchronized. Basically, the clips that exist in deck 1 should also exist in deck 2, so that when you load a song, you can load it on either deck and it will be an exact copy.
So deck 1 and 2 are the same thing. Like
they're
they're
the same thing, the same collection of clips. Yeah.
What's the point in having 2 decks?
So the point in having 2 decks is this is part of kind of a larger project that I'm working on, where I want to be basically use a touchscreen software to load songs into different decks and be able to crossfade just like a traditional DJ experience. And so by having 2 different decks, you're able to preload a song on a different deck, and then you can, if you have a queue set up, you can like start some of the clips or parts on the other song and then crossfade and then mix songs. So it's basically giving you a DJ workflow. And so what this what this looks like on the pedal is, now there's this load song command that you can put on a button. So like, let's say I select this button right here, bottom left button. I'm going to add load song, and then load song. I'll pull this off right now. I am just saying on deck number 1, and like I said, you can have up to 9 decks. I want to load song number 1. Okay.
Yep.
And then after the song load, you have the option of doing this thing that says jump to song part switcher. And what that means is that basically if you hit this button, the data looper will then go into a kind of a special preset where all of the buttons correspond to song parts. So like I'm on, let's say I have this as load song number 1. I click on this and it jumps to the song part switcher. And what will happen is the screen will update to the song name. And then the parts will then map to the different buttons. So there's now another command called launch song part. And basically this will say on deck number whatever, launch song part whatever. You can have up to 9 parts right now. And so what will happen if you have this after song load selected to jump to song part switcher is when you click this, it'll go to a special mode that's already pre-programmed, where basically like this button is launch song part 1, this button is launch song part 2, and then when you launch a song part, the lights will correspond. It'll light up and then correspond to the song part being loaded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, loaded and launched if it has.
And launched, yeah, it'll yeah, basically if you like if you have already loaded this song and you're in that mode where the song part switcher mode, then when you hit this button, it'll launch song part 1, which will basically be this
That
song part.
oh,
So any clips on these stem tracks corresponding to that part will then get launched.
yeah, okay, that makes sense. So that would be the intro.
Exactly.
If
will
it was
launch
the first
intro.
one, and the second button would be part 2.
Exactly. So
And
yeah,
would it be launching both deck 1 and deck 2, or just one of them?
that would just be launching deck 1. When you do it this way, it will automatically jump to the song part switcher that is appropriate for the deck you just loaded the song on.
Got you. Yeah.
So like if I was to load this on deck 2, then when it jumps to the song part switcher, this launching song part thing will actually be like this, launched on deck 2.
Yes, got you. And you could correlate the bottom left button to deck 1, and the button just to the right of that is deck 2, if you wanted to, right?
You could totally do that. Yeah. So like if I wanted to say launch song 1 on deck 1 for this button, and then I go over here and I'm going to say, oh, I actually want to launch song 1 on deck 2 on this button, that's totally fine. Probably for the average person right now, it's just going to make sense to be in a single deck paradigm. That's really, unless you have additional controllers and you're like kind of an Ableton guru and you want to have that crossfading between songs, it's not going to be totally necessary.
But it's basically right now, this is just a master page for your set.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's breaking down all of the songs into their various parts, so you can, more improvisatorily move between sections of each song.
Yep, exactly. And then so there's also now a new template here that's called Song Switcher.
Okay.
And this is basically just set up as a song loader on deck 1. So you got song 1, 2, 3, 4 through 11 on the first page. This bottom right button changes the preset to 2, and then you've got basically songs 12 through 22 here, and then that's it. It goes back to song 1.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's a nice, easy way to kind of like, if you're doing a set list and you want to just step through parts, that's like a nice kind of way to do that. So I'm going to stop there for a moment and just see, do you have any questions? Because there's more. There's a couple more things to kind of clarify, but that's kind of a general swath of how the thing works.
Yeah. So just for me to recap, let's just say we're going on the one deck model, because that's really what we're talking about right now. You basically have this like song switcher mode in which you can, when I click this button, I'm in song switcher mode. Now I'm in control of song 1, in which I've arranged all of its different parts. And so I can step through all of its parts in my own timing and my own pacing. And then I can shift to song 2, correct?
Yep.
And it's like, how do I shift to, can you just pull up the page and just show me how do I differentiate between song parts of song 1 and then song 2?
Yeah. So going back to this config software, because it's kind of a good visual representation. Let's say I've loaded song 1, right? So I'm back on. Yeah, I'm on this button. I've pressed this top button and it's loaded song 1, and I've jumped to the song part switcher, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm just gonna make a new preset and then just kind of show you kind of what that would look like. Now what happens is I've got this would launch song part 1, this would launch song part 2, this would launch song part 3. Now let's say I want to go back and load song 2.
Yeah.
Well, this button, this top right button, is kind of a special button, and what it ends up doing is just jumping out of the song mode switcher and back to the preset that you were just in. So this is your exit button right here. Okay. And then when you exit, it'll take you back to that initial preset with all the different loaders, and then it'll change the screen back to the preset title of the song loader thing. So like,
Can you show me that screen again? Yeah.
yeah, so basically that looks like all of these song loaders. So
Right.
I
So that's individual songs, right? That's
individual
the
song.
differentiation between song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to
Yeah, so
22.
like
Okay,
I
cool.
click this button, it loads up a thing where then this is actually switching song parts. I click this button to exit that like inner song part switcher, and then I'm back at my load song thing.
Got it. Now, can I do looping within this while I have the song part switching activated?
Yeah, totally. So so for for an example, like let's say rather than on this preset um, having I wanted rather than having everything be a song switcher, I wanted to have like one looper and then a bunch of other song switchers.
Can I
So I
pause you? Can I pause you? So there's one that's like song switcher, which I get to choose between song 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's like part switcher.
yeah.
What is that? What's the name for part switcher?
Yeah, so the part switcher is just it's song part switcher. So if you
Song
go
part
to
switcher. Okay, cool.
load song here, it'll say jump to song part switcher.
Okay, cool. So now when I ask you the question about the can I loop within this, are you referring to like when I'm in song part switcher, I can kind of map those parameters as like now I have a looper activated, or are you referring to in the song switcher? I've got a
Um,
looper activated.
kind of both. So you can do either way. So let's take the second scenario and then go to the first scenario because it's a little bit more complicated. So let's just say I want to have a looper that's independent kind of my song. So I can just like the normal template, I can just say, okay, this is going to be a record button. This is going to be a clear button. And then this is going to be my undo button. And now this first column just corresponds to this is a looper. Now I can just say, okay, well then I want like these 6 buttons to load 6 different songs. So now I've got song 1 and I got song 2 and vice, just etc. So now I've got a looper and I've got a ability to load songs. So I
Gotcha.
can at a certain point just be messing around with this looper and then jump into a song and then I'm in song part switcher. Or I can just say I don't actually want to be able to switch parts. I just want to jump into the song. And maybe I have a part switcher that is on these bottom 2 buttons and I say, okay, like launch song part 1 and then launch song part 2, and that's it. And now basically this gives me the ability to loop on the first row. I'm actually not going to jump into the song part switcher when I load a song.
When you do jump into the song part switcher, that essentially creates a whole new template
Preset.
for the data looper, right?
Yeah, it essentially will just kind of clear the LEDs of everything else that's going on and then just makes it to where it's like, this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part 3, exit,
Uh-huh.
part 4, So, yeah, basically that will just switch parts. So that's the option if you want to kind of have like a little bit of manual control. And then you can obviously also have all of these different presets, so you could kind of orient that however you want. But that gives you the ability to have a song loader and then still be able to switch parts, and still have a looper on here.
Right.
Now the other thing that you asked about is can I have a song part like trigger looping? Right? That's essentially what you're saying?
Can I, when I'm kind of like going, let's say I'm playing song 1, I've entered song part switcher,
Yeah.
and I have the arrangement of, here's the intro, here's the verse, here's the chorus.
Yeah.
Can I have a looper going and accessible within that whole configuration?
Yeah. So the way that you would do that, if you want to have, there's kind of 2 ways to do that. If you want to have manual control over the looper
Mm-hmm.
and not have it chained to a song part that you're triggering, then you can do it this way, where you basically have this looper that is independently programmed, and then you just don't jump into song mode. Because this song part switcher mode because the song part switcher mode is really specifically just for switching song parts. The only way that you can also have a kind of display of loopers while you're in song part switcher mode is if you have 2 data loopers. So, for example, my setup, I've got 3 data loopers. The first 2 data loopers are all just dedicated to looping, and then this third one is the song part switcher and song loader. Now, the other way to do it, which is kind of actually a good segue into the next thing I want to talk about, is by chaining actions to song parts. So not only can a song part trigger a set of stems where it's like, oh, when I press song part intro, it's now all of my intro sounds. It can also do a set of actions. And so the way that you do that is with this thing that's called a common launch track and a dummy clip.
Yeah.
So, for example, like let's say I have my deck set up and that's got all the stems in it. What I can do in addition is have a track here that has #L inside the track name. So let's just say this is a dummy clip thing, right? So then anything that has a #L, which means launcher track, inside the track name here, when I trigger a song part, the clip that is on that horizontal row inside this track will also trigger.
Yeah.
So basically that'll give you the ability to trigger the intro part on deck 1. The deck 2 stems will not launch, but any clip that's here will launch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so what you can do with that is all kinds of stuff. You can go into this Ableton envelope section. I can turn loop off. And then I can just say, okay, like what I want to do is like, this is a pitch bend, or I can say, I want to do a program change that changes my guitar effect. Or the other thing that you can do is I'm going to go open a DL1 instance here, which is our looper plugin, and drop that on the track. And then I'm just going to make a dummy clip right now. So you can just, you can make a clip of silence here. So here's just a really like short clip that's completely silent, nothing in there. I'm going to not warp it, not loop it. And then in the envelope section, actually it has to be warped to turn the envelopes on. I can now control any parameter of DL1. So for example, I'm just going to control the big button parameter, which is the big button on DL1, and just turn that on. And so now what this will do, as long as I say looper1 #L, when I trigger the song part intro, it will trigger this dummy clip, which is basically just saying record. And if I leave the monitor to in, it won't interrupt the audio. It'll just trigger the automation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got you. And the looper 1 is that on the dummy clip, or is it on the looper 1 #L clip?
So this track has this looper instance, right?
Got it.
And so if I want the intro part to trigger record on this looper, I basically just do this, make a dummy clip that has the record action. And then when I launch the intro part, the looper will start recording.
Got you.
And then the same logic follows that, like when I launch part 2, I can say, okay, stop
the looper.
And so, yeah, we'll just go, here, we'll go to the stop action and we'll just say stop on. And now basically whenever this part triggers, it'll stop the looper.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you can program these advanced actions, and you can do anything really. So you can have a, I've like programmed a thing where it's like, I want this, I'm gonna do a bunch of looping, and then I want to have this big swell happen that adds a bunch of reverb and then like triggers a drop, so I can press one button and it'll take the audio that I've just made, and garble it up and then drop, and it does all that just with these automated dummy clips, that are chained to this song part.
So like an example, could you automate the reverb so that it's like, instead of just on off, you're getting like a slope?
Yeah.
Like if I want to make like a build with a lot of reverb, maybe a song part that has add a riser or something like that.
Yeah, totally. So let's just do that real quick. So I just added let's say this is my like guitar track or something, right?
Yeah.
And I want to add a reverb riser. So in that case, I would go in here and you need to have the clip has to be the length of, at least the length of the thing that you want to do. So
Sure.
I just extended this clip to make it 4 bars, right? And I still don't want to loop it, because I just want this to happen once. So then I'm going to go into reverb. I'm just going to go to dry wet. And then I'm just going to go
Automations
from 0,
envelope,
to 50, and then you kind of got to decide if, like, at the end of that, do you want it to drop back down to 0, or do you want it to just be stuck on a super high thing, so usually after that, you want to kind of chain it to something, right? And so now when I launch this will automate that dry wet knob for me, all the way up in this kind of smooth linear way, and this will get triggered when I launch that intro part. So it gives you this like powerful way to perform this kind of like prepared piano kind of situation, where I've like set up a bunch of things that are going to do complicated stuff that I can't do as one person. It's like in the guitar world, like if you have 10 guitar effects and you want to turn like 5 pedals on at once, you don't have the feet for it, But so in the guitar world, they've now have these like multi-effect switcher crazy things where you plug in every pedal to that, and then you can chain one master button to turn on kind of presets. And this is kind of the extension. This is kind of the like
digital
analog to that. Extension of that. Yeah.
So could you show me how you would chain multiple? Like if I have a guitar effect that's got a few things going on. Actually, wait, before I ask that question, if in the first clip I turn the reverb wet to 100% and leave it really high, it's going to stay like that in the second clip, correct? Even if there's like nothing you're playing.
Yeah, you can see like a non-automated parameter here has this kind of dotted line. So like, if we go into the reverb, like the diffuse level, I'm not automating the diffuse level, but if I change, let's see if I can find that in here, so if I change the diffuse level to 6 dB, and then I go back and look at it, it's now at the top, right? So this clip will just read the state of the parameter wherever it is.
And that's only looking at what's going through the data looper, like the guitar, right?
Well, this is only you can look at any parameter that's on this track.
Got it.
Right, and you can automate multiple parameters. So, you see this dry wet now has this like red dot next to it. Like let's say I wanted at the end of that dry wet thing, I'm going to turn freeze on, which basically like freezes the audio tail. So if I do that like right here, for example, but I started on off, then it'll just increase the reverb and then freeze it. And then I can say, okay, on song part 2, I know that I'll turn freeze off right here. And then I'm going to take this dry wet thing and then go from 100% all the way down to 0. So now now what's happening is the intro makes this big reverb swell. And then whenever I'm ready, I can just hit part 2, and then part 2 brings the reverb down. Or I can like make it drastic.
So you can basically like fine tune the articulation of your transitions between points in the song while still holding the live feel.
Yeah,
And
totally.
you could simultaneously kind of map the on off buttons if like I wanted to have like a granulator going at one part. Like
Exactly.
I could turn that off so it's not taking up CPU and then turn a bunch of things on at once.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, you can basically do that with anything. So I guess I'm not super clear what the point of the dummy clip #L is.
So basically the hashtag L indicates that no matter what deck the song that's loaded is on, I want to trigger the clip that's associated with the song part either way. Like, so even if I have song 1 loaded on deck 2 and I trigger the intro, this dummy clip will still trigger. These dummy clips will still trigger. If I have song 1 loaded on deck 1 and I trigger the intro, these dummy clips will still trigger.
Do I need both of can I do either or do I need both of them?
The kind of deck idea is I mean, you could just use the hashtag L clips. I think it will still work without the deck group tracks.
I actually mean about you have dummy clip #L and looper 1 #L. Do those need to
that's
both
just a
be
name.
together?
So yeah, that's just a name. You can add as many or as little of these launch tracks as you want. So like, for example, let's say I had, I had this guitar #L, and then I had another track that was like vocals. And I don't actually want any, like, maybe I have some clips on here that do some effects, but I don't actually want them to be triggered by my data looper song part switcher. So I'm just not going to I'm not going to put #L on here. So even if there's a clip in here, like let's say this dummy clip is in here and this is like, pitch down or something like that. This will never get triggered by launching a song part. So I can like manually map that to a key here and say, okay, and when I press S, it's now going to trigger that.
So what if I want it to be pitched down at a certain part of the song, then I would do #L. And then I would also have to kind of, if it's going to be a #L clip, then I would have to specify what kind of parameters I want it to walk through for each part of the song.
You would just have to basically you have to associate it with the song part. So like, let's say if I wanted it to be song part 2 on song number 2, then I'd put it right here. No matter whether or not it has the #L, a dummy clip will still work. So I can still automate parameters, like whatever parameters I want here. And this will still, the dummy clip thing exists independent of the data looper. Like that's
you're launching the whole scene.
Sorry, one more time.
Because you're launching that whole scene.
Well, no. This will not get triggered when you launch the part, right? This will only get triggered manually if it doesn't have the #L. Now, if I add the #L, then when I trigger song part 2 on any deck of song number 2, it will trigger this clip.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I understand that. And then if, let's just say I have it right. Let's say I have it at the beginning, the intro for song part 2. And then I don't have anything for part 2 of song 2.
Okay. So
yeah, just put it above.
Right.
Yeah. And then put pitch down at, like, make a duplicate.
Okay.
And then put it just below. And let's just say that's pitch up.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
What happens during part 2?
So during part 2, if there is a stop button here, this stop button will get triggered. You can remove the stop button by going here.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if let's say this was not a dummy clip, let's say it had actually like some kind of audio in it and it was looping. Right now, because I removed the stop button, this would just continue to loop and nothing would actually happen here. If I add a stop button, it'll trigger the stop button.
But if I'm using that just for effects and
Then
just for an
it
effect
won't
on my
really,
vocals,
yeah, it won't do anything really.
so it'll just be pitched down as I go through the song until it receives new information to pitch up.
Yeah, you would have to then say like normal pitch, you
Got
know,
it.
and then have
Yeah.
have the automation be like, okay, cool, normal pitch, you know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, and just to clarify, song part two, like when in song number 1, part 2, when you press play, that is not launching a horizontal scene. That is something specifically launching in deck 1 or deck 2, whichever you specify, correct?
Yeah, so like if I launch the intro for song number 2 and I decide to launch it on deck 1, it'll only trigger these clips,
Yeah,
then any clips that are on my common launcher tracks.
got it.
Whereas if I launched song 2 intro on deck 2, it'll trigger these clips
And
and
common
will
launcher
still
tracks.
trigger the common launcher tracks.
Right. And for most use cases, or at least everything that we've spoken thus far, you don't need a second deck
No.
until you're crossfading.
Yeah, and basically, you know, the long-standing kind of project timeline is that there's a touchscreen interface that I've built that has basically it pulls up all these song names. When you load a song, it pulls the song parts in. It shows the different decks. You can do the crossfading, and then you have all the DJ effects of like, you know, beat, repeat,
Totally.
jump, set cue points, and stuff like that. And so that's kind of the next evolution that I'm like, you know, slowly picking away at.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is a step, definitely a huge step towards it.
Yeah.
It creates so much.
Sure.
Yeah, I can see how this creates so much freedom in one's ability to walk through their song in a way that's not stagnant.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, we've had this kind of like complicated, heady discussion about like how this works, but like at the end of the day, you know, it can be as simple as like, I'm a guy that plays like Creedence cover songs, you know, and I just have like there's a solo section that has some backing tracked organ or something like that, and then there's a verse section that like has a drum beat that I trigger, and I can just basically say like, okay, cool, I'm loading Creedence song number 1, and then now I'm on like it triggered the intro, like there's a drum beat playing, and like, oh, I'm gonna go to the solo, and I press song part number 2, and then it's like, sweet, now I'm soloing, and I can solo for as long as I want, and then I'm gonna go to the outro, you know. And so it's like it ultimately, all this technology is like for a simple musical context.
Totally.
But yeah, you need to kind of understand how it works.
Yeah. Cool. That I feel like I understand.
Yeah. Well, so Jay, I have sent Jay the beta. Depending on when you're watching this might be something that's out. But Jay, I think maybe we can do a part 2 of just you now installing it, going through the workflow on your own, opening up the templates, and just trying to use the thing. And we can kind of just like see what are the user frustrations, what are the things that Vince did not anticipate are actually complicated, and he says as totally everyone knows. But I think this is probably a good place to end a part 1 video, as just a kind of like explanation of the whole thing.
Love it.
Yeah, you know, it's a 40-minute video, so if you've watched this, congratulations, you've made it to the end.
You're one of the lucky ones.
One of the lucky ones. And
welcome to the frontier of music, my friends.
Frontier. All right. Goodbye.